Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I wish to express my sincere appreciation and gratitude to the Special Rapporteur, Professor Elena Dutton, for inviting me to speak at this important event on the impact of unilateral coercive measures on the delivery of humanitarian aid hosted in conjunction with the ongoing session of the Human Rights Council. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, but it's my honour to represent Caritas Internationalis and to contribute to today's discussion on this important topic by sharing some of the key findings and conclusions of a joint report that we, Caritas Internationalis, released last year with the World Council of Churches and with the World Evangelical Alliance. Our research builds on anecdotal evidence and creates a firm foundation for future action by identifying the main challenges experienced by our members in their humanitarian work. Firstly, we found four main administrative challenges faced by our members as a result of sanctions. Understanding the scope of sanctions is a challenge. Sanctions legislations are often vague and difficult to understand. The vagueness of words and legal terminology, as well as multiple references to other legal documents, is problematic, as it is key to understand how to comply with sanctions correctly in the respective operational environments in order to implement humanitarian projects effectively. The second challenge is the legal repercussions and de-risking. What happens if a humanitarian organisation were to violate a sanctions regime? Does it face legal repercussions? Our study shows that humanitarian organisations have rarely become the target of legal investigations because of violations of sanctions requirements. Nevertheless, there is a real threat of legal consequences for non-compliance with unilateral coercive measures and associated reputational harm. There are also obstacles faced when applying for humanitarian licenses. In order to work effectively, organisations delivering humanitarian aid can apply for licenses that exempt them from sanctions requirements. The application for humanitarian licenses causes heavy administrative burdens, generates extra costs, and is time-consuming. There's also extra due diligence requirements and processes. In order to ensure that humanitarian organisations do not engage with sanctioned individuals or entities, banks, suppliers, and donors require time-consuming due diligence processes because they're concerned about potential legal and reputational implications for themselves. All these measures generate additional costs and bottlenecks for humanitarian organisations due to the need to hire new staff with relevant expertise, seek external legal counsel, and redirect staff on fulfilling due diligence requirements and applying for licenses, instead of focusing on project implementation and providing the critical life-saving assistance they exist to do. This is especially hard on small local organisations like Caritas's local national members, who do not necessarily have the required resources, means, or legal expertise or assistance. And just to note, this is in direct contradiction with the localisation agenda. Instead of supporting and empowering local leadership, sanctions impose additional burdens and risks on local organisations. The report also highlights three major operational challenges, and these are, firstly, additional difficulties in importing and exporting humanitarian goods, particularly those with dual use, and doing so to sanctioned countries due to over-compliance with sanctions by service providers and key suppliers. Secondly, travel restrictions to sanctions countries, time-consuming visa applications are required and often rejected. And thirdly, an important challenge to stress is the de-risking undertaken by banks and over-compliance with sanctions, whereby banks often refuse to transfer funds to local and international humanitarian NGOs providing humanitarian relief in sanctioned countries, despite humanitarian exemptions being in place. And we in Caritas have experienced this many, many times. Our member organisations dedicate an increasing amount of time in providing administrative proof to banks about the use of their funds. This is a colossal waste of time, and it causes months of delay in receiving funds and hampers critical life-saving activities on the ground. Those who suffer the direct consequences are the most vulnerable communities. We particularly urge sanctioning states to take all possible actions to support humanitarian organisations and address the fear of banks and financial institutions to carry out transactions required for the delivery of humanitarian aid. We also ask you to pay greater attention to highlight and address the negative consequences of bank de-risking and promote open dialogue between financial institutions, humanitarian actors, donors, and policymakers. We ask that reliable local and international NGOs should benefit from a simplified and fast procedure to allow for a timely implementation of their relief programs. And we also ask that you systematically include humanitarian actors in the renewal mechanisms of existing sanctions regimes to provide evidence about their humanitarian impact. Finally, as I closed, I just want to say that I personally question the legitimacy of sanctions as a foreign policy instrument at all. They are a classic politician's syllogism. Something must be done, this is something, therefore this must be done. But what we repeatedly see in our programs is that sanctions regimes are disproportionate, they are indiscriminate, and they tar whole nations with the same brush. And in doing so, the rich still continue to make money out of the trading opportunities, but it's the poorest who suffer first, worst, and greatest. Thank you for your time this afternoon.